Absolutely. So my name is Timotheus Gordon, also known as TJ Gordon, because Timotheus is a little too Greek sounding or Latin sounding for a lot of people. So TJ will do. He, his, him pronouns. And I'm just a person who wears a lot of hats. In addition to being a autistic dad to a goddaughter and a son. Both of them are about to be 3 in the spring, basically. I am a research associate at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And what I do there is either do research or create programs or presentations on inclusion of people with disabilities in sports, higher education, businesses, and entrepreneurship. And I also focus a lot on race and disability. Speaking of which, I am also, of course, the writer and creator of the Black Autist, AUTIST. And for that blog, I use my personal experiences as well as current news and experiences from others to illustrate being autistic and being disabled in general in what I call the African diaspora. So I'm not just talking about African Americans in the United States, but also people of African descent everywhere, including, of course, the motherland of Africa. The medical model of autism right now is that if you're white and you have traits or characteristics of autism, you're autistic. However, if you a person of color, especially Black, then you're seen as a threat, or you may be labeled with another condition that's not autistic. In my opinion, it could be simply because autism is meant to be for white people in general, historically white male presenting folks. However, as more research came about over the years, autism can happen to anybody. Black, white, Asian descent, indigenous folks, cis male, cis gender folks, trans, anybody. But I think one of the misconceptions that needs to be addressed is recognizing that autism is the part of the human experience. It is not limited to just one group. And that also means changing the diagnosis and the practices to not only address autism itself, but also how autism is linked to a person's culture. So I guess it has to be, the scope has to be much broader. As far as the media representation of autistic people, too white. It's still too white. Let's be honest, it's still too white. In fact, I don't see as many autistic actors. If they do see if we do see autistic actors, they're not in lead roles. They are there to portray the stereotypes of autism, which usually someone who is obsessed with trains, animals, science, math, the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper type of autistic people. In order to have complete media representation of the autism spectrum, one, hire autistic people to be actors and creators of shows, but also create a narrative where It's about the autistic person's individual experience and not autism itself, especially when we're addressing autism and race. Because just by being African American, I'm not the typical autistic person. My experience is just as unique as, I don't know, typical Grandin's, your experience, or anybody else's. Well, for some of us, as you know, we have our moments of sensory overload where it hurts to hear things, it hurts to touch, it hurts to feel things, depending on the sensation. And that could cause us to have moments where we melt down or we need to get out of the situation. Some people suggested to autistic people in the past, just take it. We're not going to change things around for you. Just take it. It's nothing. But for instance, I hate when I hear popping noises. So pop the balloon. If I hear a gunshot from close range or even a firecracker, it scares the hell out of me. But for the longest, especially if you in a culture that promotes community and large gatherings, and you had a lot of birthday parties, it's hard to say, well, can you get rid of the balloons for one person? You can't, right? But however, I think I'm glad that I'm seeing more family members or community folks in general understanding ways where it can be a happy medium for everybody. So encouraging the use of headphones or earplugs to litigate the loud noises, or the need to go to another much braver and quieter space if you need a sensory break, or suggest places or practices where it's not as noisy or chaotic in my case. So I think just the recognition that people may be sensitive to certain sensory things, and also there are ways to address it beyond just suck it up, goes a long way. For those who listened to the interview, masking is basically how to hide your artistic traits and appear as neurotypical as possible. In the Black community, we also call it code switching, where I would speak in a more formal way at work, but then when I'm in my home community, I will probably speak in African American English or Ebonics, whatever you want to call it, Black English, where it's more specific to my culture. So masking in just a particular autistic sense, for lack of better words, could look like don't stim, don't move around and rock back and forth or spin, or when you're excited, you gotta calm down. That could be masking. From I understand, people may not understand overly excited people or people who spin to calm down, but they don't do it. They don't exhibit autistic traits to annoy neurotypicals. They display autistic traits because one, that's what they are, and two, they responded to joy, pain, etc. That is different from neurotypicals. But let's add to that not only masking to survive in the neurotypical world, but also as a Black man on the spectrum, I had to mask to make money. I had to mask to fit in with the culture and the community. I had to mask in order for me not to be killed by the police. Otherwise, my stimming and autistic traits may be mistaken for being a criminal. I also had to mask, especially as a kid and teenager, to be safe from potential gang violence and bullying. Otherwise, if I be my autistic self, then I could potentially get jumped or killed or be mistaken for a gang member because of certain emotions. So masking as a Black autistic person or a person of color in general is much more layered and honestly more complex and painful because you have to worry about so many more scenarios than if you're just autistic. Then you're focusing more so blending in with the workplace, the neurotypical world, maybe certain family members, but you can still be autistic to everybody else. Being people of color on the autism spectrum is our survival. We gotta figure way more things. Even for I would even add another layer for some of us. We had a mask to make sure we could stay in the country we want to stay in. If they see our behavior as weird, we could be deported or we could be discriminated. Oh yes, plenty of experiences. In fact, some of the experiences still affect me today. It could potentially affect my next generation of my family. So for instance, when I'm happy, especially when I'm passionate about my interests or if I do something very well, or if I was excited about, let's say I was excited about the birth of my first child, my son. Of course, I'll go yell, scream, and talk about it to everybody. It's exciting. Of course. Of course, I'm going to stem. Of course, I'm going to dive right into things. Especially as an autistic person, I like to dive right into things instead of exciting. But I've been told a lot when I'm excited as a child, especially a Black child, calm down, calm down, calm down. Or when I'm angry about something, calm down, calm down, calm down. And now it gets to the point where I want to share my joys and my sorrows to my peers or community members or even people in the autistic community. I can't. I'm afraid how I'll be perceived. I may be told to calm down. I may be told that it's all in my head or just go pop a crazy pill, quote unquote, and not let me be myself or to express my joy and pain in a way that I feel comfortable expressing in my own language or way or whatever. I think that's one way that my autism has been policed over the years. Another way that my autism is gets policed is even the police in a special interest. Like As a child and still now, I love Pokemon. I'm a Pokemon fanatic. I like to talk about anime or history. However, I was told by, some peers, do not talk about special interests like Pokemon or whatever the case. They're not gonna like you. They're gonna think you're uncool. But I get into an autistic community as a Black autistic person. Another of my special interests since childhood happens to be also something that's normalized, especially in America. It's sports, especially American football. I could not only talk about the game itself, I could talk about plays, trades, American football culture, history of football. I go on and on with it. It's accessible at the bars with my friends, right? But if I get into our autistic community, because of the perception of what autistic supposed to enjoy, I get shamed. I can get not shamed, but I get a crazy look when I talk about football over trains, mathematics, or the history of Egypt or something like that. Yes, I'll go with one particular tip. That is, I'll put it all in one package, by the way.
Yeah.
You listen to the person, you respect the person, you do not focus on what the person cannot do, but rather what the person can do and what the person needs to perform their tasks or succeed in life. That's all four in a nutshell. If you listen to autistic people and their experiences, if you respect the fact that their experience is just as valid as the other person, no matter how different their experiences are, you recognize their talents or what they can bring to the table in a job or the community, and also recognize what resources they may need. It could be communication devices, more time to process, alternate ways of seeing the world, and other things. Then I think that those things will challenge not only ableism, but also internal ableism as well. And that could definitely be helpful in fully including autistic people, including Black autistic people into the community, as opposed to just saying, oh, because he's autistic or they're autistic, they're rough for us just because of being autistic. I agree. And I think we both mentioned that we are parents also. In a our talk before the interview, that especially will come into play when helping autistic parents navigate parenthood, especially for the first time, seeing that our views of parenthood is different within itself because how we see the world, let alone how we see parenting or the barriers we may face. So those four things I mentioned would definitely come to play
Yes,
in
absolutely.
Understanding autistic parents who want to be good parents and want to use their autistic traits to get to that point, and to also help autistic parents realize that they can do it and their autistic abilities and their culture can help them get there. Those two things are not invalid. So I am a part of a racial justice organization within a local center for independent living called Access Living. The name of the group within Access Living is called Advance Your Leadership Power, or AYLP. What AYLP have done in Illinois for the past few years is to encourage our local congressmen, if you may, or we call them the General Assembly in Illinois, to pass a bill called Community Emergency Supports and Services Act, where people who are trained in handling emergencies like mental health emergencies or behavioral health emergencies are the first to arrive in those situations, and then they could take the person to either the hospital or local mental health resources, or even a brave space to decompress. But the point of the intention behind the bill is to highlight and encourage the use of more local mental health and behavioral health resources for people with disabilities or for people in general, and to minimize police involvement, to focusing more on the criminal aspect as opposed to responding to behavioral health emergency crisis. Because actually the reason why we had a bill in the first place is because we wanted to do something about an autistic teenager named Stefan Edward Watts, who in 2012 was killed by the police after the police responded to a mental health emergency. Actually, it wasn't even an emergency afterwards. The father said everything was fine, but it still came anyway. The police presence made the situation worse, and because the officers felt threatened by Stefan holding a butter knife, they shot him dead. And we noticed that there are also cases like Stefan from a disability and racial standpoint where the disability was misunderstood and the police killed them for it, basically, instead of giving them help. That's why SESTA needed to be passed. It was passed and signed in August of 2021 in the state. So that's what we've been doing. And now we're in the process of encouraging local governments to create such systems where it's more about training first responders to respond to mental health and behavioral health emergencies, just like how first responders respond to physical emergencies, and then take them to the resources they want or need to go to, as opposed to jail or the grave.